Today we learned that Beijing worked to punish a family member of a parliamentarian here in this House for a vote. And the intelligence organization of the government was aware of this for 2 years, but the Prime Minister didn't tell the member in question. It was a diplomat who is still on the website of the Chinese consulate in Toronto. Why? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely unacceptable to see anyone being intimidated, especially a member of Parliament in this House. And we are following up on this matter on the report published today. I asked different security experts to monitor the situation. This is something, obviously, that we need to take seriously, and that's what we're doing. Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Can't vote in the interests of Canada while their family members are threatened as consequence of those votes. It is unacceptable, as the Prime Minister said, which is why it's so strange that he accepted it. Right. His government produced a briefing note which exposed these threats to the MP's family 2 years ago. And yet the diplomat that worked to punish a Canadian MP's family is still in Canada when the Prime Minister could have expelled him. Why didn't he expel this diplomat?
Yeah! Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It is absolutely unacceptable for any Canadian to be subject to intimidation via foreign power, particularly threats against family and against families of members of Parliament. That's why, as the reports came out this morning, I immediately asked officials to follow up on these reports and to get to the bottom of this. I also asked for outreach both on the political and the official side to the member in question. We are going to continue to make sure this is taken extremely seriously.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, that's just false. He didn't immediately take action. He took action after the media found out about it. That's right. His government has known that a Canadian MP had his family threatened because that MP voted for human rights in the House of Commons. He knew about that for 2 years. He did exactly nothing. Furthermore, the same diplomat that orchestrated these threats against the MP's family still works in the Toronto consulate at Beijing, even though the Prime Minister has the power to expel him. Will he expel him today?
Yeah. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
As the reports were made public this morning, we followed up immediately with top officials to get all the information on this file, on what happened, on who was informed and who was not informed, to make sure that we are following up in an appropriate way. This is absolutely unacceptable, and it shouldn't have happened.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And yet he did accept it for 2 years. The same briefing note indicated 2 years ago that Beijing saw Canada as uniquely vulnerable to its interference because we have no foreign interference laws to stop them. The same laws that exist in the United States and Australia to force those paid by foreign dictatorships to register are not in existence here in Canada. Now, the CSIS warned him about this in the summer of 2021. On what date will we get a foreign influence registry to protect Canadians against these abuses?
Yeah. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
As a government, we've put in place many mechanisms to ensure that Canadians and our institutions are protected from foreign interference, and we are continuing to step up to add more. We brought in NSICOP, it's an oversight committee of parliamentarians. We brought in NSIRA. We created an elections integrity committee composed of top civil servants, and we are right now looking to establish a foreign agent registry, making sure through consultations with potentially impacted communities that it's done the right way. That's what we will continue to do to keep Canadians safe.
New and troubling information has come to light through CSIS which says that China considers Canada a high priority target and employs incentives and punishment to target this House and Chinese Canadians. This threatens the safety of members of Parliament, Chinese Canadians, and their families in China. It's enough, Mr. Speaker. When will the Liberals finally launch a public, independent inquiry on foreign interference in Canada? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for many years now, we have been putting in place mechanisms and programs to counter foreign interference, to ensure that everything possible is being done to fight Chinese interference. We're going to continue to use those tools. We're going to continue to put in place further tools. We know that this is an issue that Canadians take seriously, and so do we.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, that clearly shows that this Prime Minister does not understand how much this is damaging our democracy. Media reports came out today confirming that Canada is a high priority country for foreign interference from the Chinese government. MPs, their families, and even their staff are being targets of incentives and punishments, Mr. Speaker. Canadians deserve transparency, and this government has refused to call a fully public inquiry every step of the way. Why does the government fail to bring forward the one thing that will restore trust in our democracy?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the broad range of experts who've looked into this, there are multiple opinions on whether an open public inquiry is actually the best tool to restore confidence in Canadians. That's why we tasked an independent expert in our former Governor General David Johnston to look at all the tools we have to counter foreign interference, to look at the concerns that Canadians have, and to choose the best path forward. If he chooses a public inquiry, we will absolutely move forward with a public inquiry. We will take the right tools necessary to restore Canadians' confidence.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has to answer these questions. He's known now for 2 years that the family of a member of Parliament was threatened for harassment and other penalties because of how he voted on human rights in the House of Commons. For 2 years, the Prime Minister did nothing to protect the family or to punish the Canadian-based Beijing diplomat who orchestrated the entire attack against that family. Can the Prime Minister confirm if the responsible diplomat from Beijing will be expelled by the end of business day today?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Speaker, I want to assure every member in this chamber that we take
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I assure every member in this chamber that we take the reports that have surfaced recently very seriously. In fact, I reached out directly to the member for Wellington Halton Hills to share my concerns. I told him that I have instructed CISA to provide him with an update, but this government will continue to take concrete actions to combat foreign interference, including the $49 million that we have allocated in Budget 2023 to protect all Canadians from foreign interference. Mr. Speaker, this is not a partisan issue. We should do this work together to protect all parliamentarians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's time for the Prime Minister to stand up and do his job. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up for what?
I just want to remind the Honourable Order. I want to remind the Honourable Members to speak through the Speaker and not directly to each other. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Will the Prime Minister finally stand up for this country and its people against a foreign dictatorship that has been interfering in our land for far too long? Yes or no?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, over the heckles of the Conservatives on the other side of the aisle, this Prime Minister and our government has been standing up, doing the relentless, tireless work of defending.
Okay. Order. This is not a good start to a Monday, and it started off fairly well. I just want to... Okay, wait a minute. When you start heckling the Speaker, there's a problem there. So, are we going to play nice, or do we start getting tough? I'll let the Honourable Minister for Public Safety start again, and I want to remind the Honourable members how we're going to scramble things or maybe eliminate a few questions as well. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government has been doing the concrete, tireless work that is necessary to combat foreign interference, to protect our democratic institutions by creating new powers, adding more resources for all of the security and intelligence agencies that are there to protect our communities, our institutions, and most importantly, Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I encourage the Conservative politicians on the other side of the aisle to get behind what is a nonpartisan cause and protect Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, at least I got a direct answer. I asked if he would stand up, and of course he did not stand up, which is very clear. This Prime Minister knew for 2 years that Beijing thought Canada was uniquely vulnerable to its bullying and interference because we do not have anti-foreign interference laws, unlike the Australians and Americans. And yet, for 2 years after his intelligence bodies warned him of that, he did absolutely nothing. Will he stand up and do his job now?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at a pretty young age, I personally learned what it was like to be targeted by an authoritarian communist regime. As a Ukrainian Canadian, I have always known that authoritarian communist regimes particularly target diaspora communities here in Canada. That is wrong, Mr. Speaker. And you know what makes it easier to target Canada and Canadian democracy? When we are divided, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has to stop hiding behind his ministers. The vacation is over. He has work to do. He wants to talk about taking partisanship out of it. You know what would have been a nonpartisan thing to do? To recognize that a Conservative MP, or that any MP for any party, had his family threatened because of a vote casted on this floor, and to take immediate action against the diplomats that did those threats. That would have been the nonpartisan thing to do. Why didn't he do it?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take a moment, and it's uncharacteristic of me to express my outrage at what has happened to the member for Wellington-Halton Hills, and it could be any one of us in this House who is targeted for actions that we have taken. It is an outrage, and we should all express that collectively. This Prime Minister will continue to work for Canadians, for Canadian democracy. We will continue to stand together and make sure that any foreign interference will never be tolerated. If a diplomat has broken the Vienna Convention, he or she will be expelled. You have the Honourable